Hello. Well, so today I'm going to talk about some of the current things that are going on in the climate movement, and I'm going to talk about um, also someone asked me recently, is Greta Thunberg right? And I answer completely yes. Do I agree with her? Completely yes. So I'm going to get into more explaining all of that, and also I'm going to talk a bit more about different activists and other things. So current events going on for the 22nd. So there's strikes Earth Day. For Earth Day, one is on Earth, which is April 22nd, April 23rd, or Earth Day is on April 22nd, and then they continue on the 23rd and 24th. Because of coronavirus, they were moved to being online. Um, so they're now online. Um, so they're going to be doing and we're going to keep doing days of action online. So now things moved to being online, so yeah, instead of doing them in person because of coronavirus. And another thing that's going on is COP26. Every year, um, um, every year, there's diplomats, politicians, and stuff get together at one of these climate conferences called COP something. This is the 26th one, so it's COP26. And so usually nothing gets done, unfortunately. Nothing comes out of them, but Paris Agreement came out of them. So we are hope this year they're not even sure if they're going to hold it because of coronavirus. Now I feel that if they don't hold it, that would be disastrous. That would be horrible. That would be ridiculous. And like this, they're debating whether to put it online. Like if you want to put it online, go ahead. This is in November, and I'm hopeful that this will end by this will end sometime this summer. So I'm hoping that that will go on. But polluters get involved in these climate negotiations. Fossil fuel interests get involved and start sponsoring things and other stuff to try to prevent actual action from being done on climate. So this year we're doing a campaign called Polluters Out, #PollutersOut, and trying to get the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change um, and the UK government, because this year it's being held in Glasgow, Scotland, to for or to or getting them to kick the polluters out of it. Another thing that's going on, Morgan Chase is the biggest financer of fossil fuels in the world, and activists have put pressure on Morgan Chase to stop funding fossil fuels. Some of its economists said this was going to hurt our business because this is going to be very detrimental to our economy. And so Morgan Chase said we're not drilling in the Arctic anymore, and we're going to disclose our climate risks by 2024. But I don't think that goes far enough. You need to completely get rid of it. We have timeline. If you go see my projections edition, where we need to peak within 5 years. We need to get emissions, and um if we used up all our stockpiles of fossil fuels, we'd already be past 1.5 degrees Celsius. So we need to do that. Another thing is going on is the coronavirus stimulus. I'm pressuring, and many other activists are pressuring the government to put climate stuff related infrastructure and other things and renewable energy tax credits, extend and expand the renewable energy production tax credit, and other climate related stuff in these stimuluses. and try to transform it into something like it was in 2009 with the stimulus there. So, what am I doing? Sending letters and emails and making phone calls to Congress people in state legislature, in the UN framework, climate change, CNN, Google, Morgan Chase, and a bunch of other places. Okay. Someone said, do I agree with Greta Thunberg? Yes. Ah. So, what was I gonna say? Most of what she says, like the facts she points out, or a lot of things she puts out are her own opinions. They're just facts of the IPCC. For example, she just, like, um, during, when she came to the U.S. and at the, committee hearing, the climate crisis committee hearing, and she just submitted the UN special work report on 1.5 degrees Celsius as her testimony. She just gave 8 sentences. And, so, so, she, so, so she makes clear that deadlines, we have to have a 50% chance of staying under 1.5 degrees Celsius. We have to get our emissions down by 50% by 2030 and 100% by 2050. And more recently, she has sort of she suggested a target of 80% by 2030 and net zero by 2050, because if you look at the timeline, that's really what it needs, or earlier than 2050. 80% by reduction emissions by 2030, and that is doable. Energy scientists, economists say that's doable. Anything more is sort of iffy, but that's doable. So we need to do that. We need to get emissions down by 80% by 2030 and to net zero by 2050. And she says carbon budgets. We only have our current rate of warming. This is the IPCC says that we have 8 years to of our current rate of emissions. We only have 8 years until we pass 1.5 degrees Celsius, and it's for 50% chance. Or then we only have 8 years until passing 1.5 degrees Celsius. She also says keep the fossil fuels in the ground. The IPCC special report on 1.5 degrees Celsius says if we just used up all the fossil fuels we just have stockpiled today, we would go past 1.5 degrees Celsius. So burning more fossil fuels is not an option. Climate justice. She also puts an emphasis on equity. She puts emphasis on vulnerable populations. Developing countries are going to be more vulnerable than industrialized countries, native communities, and transition justice. She also says that we need to get to net zero, which is also everything. She's right on the dot. Almost, she's right on the dot every single time. And honestly, I think she's smarter than I am, anyways. So 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 World War. Should we also need a World War II mobilization to stop climate change? We need to mobilize our economy and make the purpose of our economy getting off fossil fuels. Just like we did in World War II, made the purpose of the economy winning the war. That's what we need to do to solve this crisis. That's what we need to do. We need to do that. She also says that Western countries overconsume, which is true. If we had just if everybody lived like the U.S., we would need over 4 Earths. And these other countries also want to get where we are too. So that's sort of And then she also says that no one's here holding their Paris pledges or targets, which is also completely true. No industrialized country is holding the Paris pledge targets. The only countries that are the Gambia and Morocco. So she also says that why should I study? Why should I go to school? Why should I study for a future I don't have? And I completely agree with her with that. Honestly, I don't know why I'm going to college, because by the time I'm like by the time I get out in 2024, I hope most climate policy is already done. We're already on the way to getting off being decarbonized. It's weird to hope that you don't have a future in your own career because you feel most of your career is done, but I want climate change to be stopped. Um, what she does daily, um, she's vegan and she doesn't fly. I've stopped eating beef and I don't fly unless it's climate related and I offset the emissions. So, and I completely agree with her there as well. Um, so Greta Thunberg has Asperger's, OCD, and selective mutism. I have Asperger's syndrome. Um, and so I'm not going to get anywhere with any people that are denying it, but I'm going to tell her story anyways for people that don't know everything that like people that follow her know. So Greta Thunberg is the daughter of an actor in Sweden and a singer, and so she at a young age, like people with Asperger's, when they have special interests, they have interests they're obsessed over. One of mine's climate change, hers is climate change. So um she got when she researched this and got started getting she stopped eating, she stopped talking to other people, she and she got, you know, she was and she got very sad over this and very upset over this, and her activism, striking for climate and doing stuff activism has helped her become, or helped her start talking and doing things again. So when people some people say, well, I'm concerned about Greta, or say stuff about Greta Thunberg's mental health, and I'm concerned for her mental health, so she should stop striking. That's just absolutely ridiculous. And also, she does have a point that, if why should she study for a future she doesn't have? And yeah, so also she got her parents to stop flying and to become vegan, and so she's the one that originated this. And if you think, like, so yeah, she also says that no one's small too small to make a difference, and how can you argue with that when she was alone striking in front of Swedish Parliament and started an entire movement, a global movement with it? I mean, that's pretty big. Big enough that it has been affecting fossil fuels stocks. Um, she also has scientists review her speeches, and she says, "Listen to the scientists." Um, so she's just quoting what the science is saying. She also realized a lot of people who were in the climate movement before her were wasting their time with deniers, including me. And I think she's realized, hey, we need to, if every other movement in the world, in the history of the world, has been focused on, you know, getting this up and, or is focused on empowerment, we should be focused on it as well. And she does have a point that nobody's doing enough. We are all countries in the world. The only two that are staying under 1.5 degrees Celsius are Gambia and Morocco. No industrialized country is. And I mean, a lot of people say they're doing stuff for climate, but are we really doing stuff for climate? I mean, are we really pressing policymakers? Are we doing everything we can with this? And I feel guilty sometimes because I don't feel that I'm doing enough, and I feel that a lot of activists feel that way. and a politician saying they do something on climate, and then they turn around and pass a fossil fuel subsidy. And it's aggravating that, they don't seem to get it. They pretend to get it, but they don't actually get it. And the politics needs to be changed, but we are changing them. And finally, we used to just talk about lowering emissions. We never talked about net zero. Net zero has finally become almost politically mainstream, and net zero has become politically mainstream, and so you know, she's has a very good point with that. Um, the points of I think we might. I don't know if we might. She says that offsetting is um she does she disagrees with offsetting because offsetting, and I disagree with offsetting too to a certain extent, but I believe for certain things if you do it a certain way at work, it's good, but I don't think it's a foolproof solution. And she says offsetting is just clever accounting, which is true. I mean, if you're taking the offset, carbon offsetting is to offset the emissions that you create by paying for some type of something else. Now, if you're paying for a renewable energy project, that doesn't make any sense because you're just preventing emissions from being emitted that should have never been emitted in the first place. So that doesn't make any sense. What makes it will make more sense is negative emissions. But as she points out, even if you did negative, like planting trees, carbon farming, and that sort of thing, even if you're doing that, you got to realize the Amazon's still being deforested, and whatever that you're doing is going to offset your offset. So, uh, we need to, but I think we need to focus. But I think for certain areas, like aviation, shipping, and industry, this would actually be a good thing to offset if they were negative emissions, not offsetting with renewable energy projects. It doesn't make any sense. She also says aviation. With aviation, she says it's aviation. She and it's one of the most carbon intensive industries in the world, and it's 2% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions, and it is. You like flying is ridiculous. It takes a ridiculous amount of energy to do it, and a different ridiculous amount of carbon emissions. So in aviation, but I don't think that people are going to stop flying. But I will not fly myself unless it's climate related and I offset it. And but I don't think everyone's going to stop flying. But her movement is good and it's pushing people and reducing the amount of people that's flying. And I will push for people to not fly as well. And but I don't think flying is going away. So I think we have to focus on using low carbon, actually good biofuels, the ones that actually work, low carbon fuels, and offsetting and fuel efficiency improvements to actually solve that. The only point that we actually disagree on is she doesn't have specific demands. I do, she feels that having a list would not be comprehensive, which is true. There's hundreds of climate policies that you can make, and there's technically everything's a climate policy. So, like, if you adapt to something, everything could be considered adaptation. So, she makes the point that she makes the point that the really, but I say she makes that point, but I think that if we have a list, it will be easier for policy makers to enact them than if we don't have a list. Other climate organizations like Sunrise Movement. I remember Sunrise Movement. I completely agree with, or I don't completely agree with everything their opinions though. Like for example, I don't agree with them not having nuclear. Nuclear is one of the safest energy sources in the world. But when something goes wrong in nuclear power, it goes really wrong. The 3 Mile Island only emitted as much radiation as an X-ray. But um, I don't think we should expand our nuclear facilities. But they're 19% of our emissions of our electricity sector pie. So I think we should. So I'm pretty. So our and there are no zero carbon way of getting energy. So I don't think we should get rid of them. But I think we shouldn't expand them either. But one reason for that, it doesn't make any sense to get rid of them because we don't have a place to put all the nuclear waste. So it just sits there in where the power plant is. And then if it's sitting there, you might as well get energy from it, you know? You might as well get energy from it. Also, Sunrise is a 2030 target for net zero. I'm not exactly sure if that's completely doable. Though, but we need to have a target that's earlier than net zero by 2050 and 50% by 2030. She also, Greta points out that it doesn't account equity into that, and it doesn't account for the breadth of positive feedback loops, and it doesn't account or the and it doesn't account for forgetting something. It doesn't account for I'm forgetting something. I know it assumes that we're going to have these technologies that using her exact words barely even exist to pump millions of tons of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere later this century. So we need to have an earlier target. And that's just from the IPCC. So also, I think that carbon capture and sequestration is a good thing. I think that if it's regulated well, it can be very helpful for the climate. But I agree with the Green New Deal completely, and I agree with them supporting Bernie Sanders and not Joe Biden. And for the most part, Sunrise Movement, I completely agree with the Sunrise Movement for the most part. There, I'm also going to give you a list of activists. I'm going to butcher some names here. So, but Greta's not the only activist. She gets a lot of focus, but there's a lot of other ones too. Alexandria Villasenor, Irsa Hirsi, Jeremy Morgan, Grace Yang, Vanessa Nanaki, Edgar McGregor, Mary Ella Stevens, Olivia Wongingmuth, Ian Price, Zai Biesta, Samantha Gazeta. So Alexander Villasenor is Friday for the Future organized in New York City, and she's part of the plaintiffs on the UN case of list of violations of the convention or bill of, or the rights of a child. The complaint on that. Irsa Hersey is one of the founders of the U.S. Youth Climate Strike. She's also and also there's Jeremy Morgan, which is a co-founder of This Is Zero Hour, another climate organization. Avarshini Pak Crash is is a founder of Sunrise Movement. German Foster the second is a Fridays for the Future organizer in Washington D.C. and has his own newspaper. Nadia Nadazar, I Grace, Haven Coleman, Evan Weber, Victoria Fernandez, Will Lawrence, Colin Benson, Vic Barrett, Ixu Zezcatli Martinez, one of the people on one of the plaintiffs in Juliana versus the U.S., Xanagri Artis, Thomas Lopez, Alsa's Mengizu Tiz, I'm butchering these names, Kevin Batal, Zena Abdolakariam, and Ayan Gabu. And then from Italy, David Wicker. From India, Lee Pryatt, Kang Jia. I can't pronounce that. I don't know how to do that. I'm sorry. John Paul Joes, Anya D. Wever from Belgium, Argentina, Yaya Wen Tarab, Germany, Elisa Dedenbeer, Netherlands, Lily Platt, Ireland, Soy O'Connor, Russia, Arkshak Mac in Kian, Uganda, Leah Nadabuki, and Didwin Nadakanga, Sengel, Maori, Damon, UK, Anna Taylor, Ballack in Scotland, Holly Hildebrand, Australia, Jean Hindliffe, Canada, Rebecca Hamilton, Autumn Peller, Brazil, Militiza Falco, Jeffrey Eduardo Torres Cortez, Annie Gonzalez, and Drainy Fisco Aldenia Blake. So there's a long list of activists, and so Greta Thunberg, and I think Greta Thunberg would also want to include other people, activists as well. So, um, so um, I think that's everything. I think I covered everything. So, I guess see ya. Bye.